Now, on critical race theory itself, which is something that I teach the texts of the classic texts by Delgado and Matsui.
Kimberly Crenshaw.
Kimberly Crenshaw, exactly. Right. We've taught them together.
Absolutely.
Actually, and I teach them in my own individual courses, because I think that's a voice, that's a perspective that has to be heard. So do critics of that perspective.
Absolutely.
So do other perspectives.
That's right.
Now, part of the problem with the public debate over critical race theory is there's no canonical definition of critical race theory. Different people mean different things by it. It begins going all the way back into the 80s with Derek Bell at Harvard Law School.
Bell, yes.
It begins with an approach focused on racial history and racial questions, a lens, as Cornell puts it. And lenses both illuminate and distort, but it begins with a lens to look at legal issues through the experience of victims of racial injustice. In itself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing, as a matter of fact. The roots are in a slightly earlier school of thought called critical legal studies, represented by Roberto Unger, with whom Cornell teaches, Duncan Kennedy at Harvard Law School, Morton Horowitz. And it's also connected with, in some ways, a very different approach, an older approach called critical theory, rooted in the thinking of people like Theodore Adorno, Max Horkheimer, probably most influentially of all in the United States, Herbert Marcuse, a theory with its own roots in Marxian analysis. I don't think that any of those approaches should be off the table, and I don't think that I'm a critic of all of those approaches, of critical race theory, critical legal studies, critical theory, Marxism. I think all of those should be on the table. None of them should be given a monopoly. So where we're in an age-appropriate situation, in universities, for example, the key thing is just to teach the conflicts. Teach the conflicts.
That's right.
That's why when Cornell and I teach Marx, we teach Hayek. When we teach Hayek, we teach Marx. We want both perspectives. We want all perspectives to be represented. And we don't tell the students what to think. We can't, because we don't agree, right? We model disagreement. The message is, you've got to read this stuff, you've got to think this stuff through, and then you've got to decide for yourself where you stand on these issues. Always tentatively, always knowing that you might be wrong about things right now. You know, you might have to change your view on further reflection or further reading, or what have you. The really tough issues get into the fore when we go into the younger years. What should we be teaching kids when they're younger? And here, I think, to the extent possible, it's never going to be 100% possible, not close to it, but to the extent possible, we have to give as factual, truthful, neutral a reading of American history as we can. Not one that is through the lens of any particular scholarly or philosophical or ideological viewpoint. If we favor one viewpoint over another, we're obviously going to be prejudicing students in favor of that view and against the competing views. We have to make decisions as legislators, as parents, as private and public school administrators about what the curriculum will be. And the key thing is to educate the students so that they can eventually read all the different competing approaches and critically think for themselves about where they should stand on them. If you start feeding them the ideology, no matter what it is, whether it's right or left, no matter what it is, early on, then you are really just indoctrinating them, and you're going to make it much more difficult for them when they are mature enough to begin thinking through these competing theories, to think through them in a productive and critical way.